And I learned so much about coronavirus. And one thing that's for certain, don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment. We have the best medicines.
After days of conflicting messages and growing concerns over the lack of transparency, President Trump returns to the White House amid lingering questions over his medical condition. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ghida Fakhry. After spending 3 nights at the Walter Reed Military Medical Center, President Trump returned to the White House earlier this week as a growing number of senior staff, campaign officials, and several Republican members of Congress tested positive for COVID-19, while his medical doctors faced harsh criticism for refusing to answer basic questions about the president's health, and his own personal physician warned that he was not completely, quote, out of the woods yet. Trump continued to downplay the pandemic.
Now I'm better, and maybe I'm immune, I don't know. But don't let it dominate your lives. Get out there, be careful. We have the best medicines in the world, and it all happened very shortly, and they're all getting approved, and the vaccines are coming momentarily.
This as the White House overruled the Food and Drug Administration's new guidelines for vaccine approval. With less than 30 days until the presidential election, the Trump campaign announced that all events involving the president would be held virtually or postponed to a later date. And while Trump maintains strong support among his base, the latest national polls show the president trailing Joe Biden by at least 14 points, the biggest margin so far. And as the pandemic continues to get worse in the U.S., with the number of infections rising in 22 states and the president himself becoming one of the 7.5 million people infected, how will his handling of this latest crisis affect his chances for re-election? I'm now joined by Matt Mackowiak, a Republican strategist and founder of the Potomac Strategy Group, a Republican communications consulting firm. Matt Mackowiak, there is a serious credibility crisis with this White House. The president's health is an issue of public concern, especially in the middle of a pandemic. Why won't the White House reveal when the president last tested negative? Why won't they give us more basic information? What do they have to hide?
Well, without knowing the facts of the situation, all of the facts, it's hard to know why they've made the decisions that they've made. You did have the presiding doctor at Walter Reed Medical Center give press conferences 3 days in a row. He answered many of the questions, not all of them. There are some privacy concerns that are part of this. I don't know why they won't answer that simple question.
Let me ask you this. Doesn't the lack of transparency that we've seen on display suggest that the official timeline we've been given by his doctors wasn't accurate, that he might have been infected well before it was revealed, in fact, possibly even before the debate, not after, that there could be a cover-up, as people are suggesting?
Well, we don't know, and you're right. The way to answer any of those questions would be to provide all that information. What I think we do know is that the president did not test positive until Thursday night when he returned from Bedminster in New Jersey. Exactly when he got coronavirus, when he became contagious, those are things we don't know at this point.
But don't you think these are things we should know? This is information they could provide?
Well, so the question really is, has the information been provided so that effective contact tracing can occur? And based on what we do know, it appears that is happening both inside the White House for people who participated in the event at the White House on Saturday and for people who were with the president on Thursday in New Jersey.
Well, that's not the case, actually. 3 of the journalists who were infected, one of them at least, has said that no contact tracing had happened. No one from the White House had been in touch with him. And this is one case, but there are plenty more.
Yeah, I can't speak to what the journalists had that occurred with them. I can speak to what the participants at the event had happened with them, and the contact tracing that's occurring at the White House itself. So again, this has been a very chaotic period of time. They've been doing the very best they can. They had the patient move from the White House to the hospital, and he still was conducting business and had full control over that entire time. So I recognize.
So from a strategy perspective, though, and you're a Republican strategist, why should voters trust the president and his administration? Anything they tell us about his condition at this stage, given the fact that they have kept so much information to themselves?
Well, it's pretty obvious now the president is in very good health at this stage. Whether he remains contagious or not remains to be seen. We have to see how many days ultimately he's isolated from everyone else. It sounds like it should be at least 3 more days, maybe 5 days. But I just can't believe that a hospital would let someone leave if they were seriously contagious with COVID. And so I think the president's timeline probably did start earlier than they've confirmed. And that what the other thing that's clear is that he began taking these treatments earlier in the timeline than almost anyone else who's had coronavirus. And so that probably shortens the timeline for him in terms of when he can get back interacting with other people.
Hold on. Are you saying that the White House, in fact, lied about the timeline? Because you are right. I mean, there's been a conflicting timeline. His own personal physician, Dr. Conley, came out and said something to the effect that it was 72 hours by the time he spoke on Saturday that the president had been infected, only to backtrack on this information. His chief of staff on Friday initially said the president had mild symptoms. We then later discovered that that was the same time he was being given supplemental oxygen at the White House. Clearly, this doesn't play very well in the polls. 70% of Americans now say they trust Trump not at all or not very much to provide them with accurate information about COVID-19. That's 32% of Republicans and 96% of Democrats. But there's some 72 to 73% of independents who have a problem trusting what comes out of the White House and what the president says about COVID. He needs every one of those independents, doesn't he, to have any chance of winning the White House again?
Look, I agree with you that the doctor and the White House chief of staff have both had different specifics that they've offered, and that's added to the confusion. There's no question that that's happened. And if we look back now, it would have been better had they been very, very clear, very upfront, and been very transparent. But at the end of the day, the president is in the position he's in now, and the only real question that matters is, was he able to continue conducting his duties as president of the United States? And every indication that we have is that he was able to do that based on photographs, based on tweets, based on phone calls.
Well, these were all staged photographs. I don't think you can say for sure that he is doing okay. In fact, his own personal physician said he wasn't quite out of the woods yet. And this is what he said as well in deflecting some of the criticism he has faced.
I was trying to reflect the upbeat attitude that the team, the president, that his course of illness has had. I didn't want to give any information that might steer the course of illness in another direction, and in doing so, it came off that we were trying to hide something, which wasn't necessarily true.
It is fine to want to reflect a certain upbeat attitude, but is it the doctor's job to put a positive spin on this, to deceive and conceal the truth from the American public?
I don't believe we know that he has deceived. He's clearly not answered every question to the satisfaction of the national and international media. But based on what we know, the president's condition has improved, that he hasn't had a fever for 3 days, that he hasn't received oxygen, I think, since at the latest early Saturday. And that he's been on several different treatments at one time, and that he was in good enough health that he could be released on Monday evening. That is what we know.
So knowing what we do about this virus, its contagion, its unpredictability, as a Republican strategist, what would you advise the Trump campaign? Should he be doing the debate on the 15th? He says he's looking forward to that. Or should he still be quarantining between now and then?
I think we'll have to see how things develop. I do think, based on what's been reported by the medical officials, that a 3 to 5 day period from now could lead to him no longer being contagious. And so that debate, I think, is possible, but we can't possibly know that yet. We have to see where we are at the end of the week.
And we also have to keep an eye, obviously, on what the president tweets between now and then. He has now compared COVID to the flu yet again. He said flu season is coming up. Many people every year, sometimes over 100,000, and despite the vaccine, die from the flu. Are we going to close down our country? No. We have learned to live with it, just like we're learning to live with COVID. Is that a responsible statement to make?
Well, I don't think anything you said there is inaccurate. The flu season at times can be very, very, very bad. It depends on the effectiveness of the vaccine, which is a little bit of a guess every year. It depends how the disease changes and how effective the vaccine is, which is sometimes, in some cases, very effective, in some cases not very effective.
Well, no, let me correct you. In fact, according to the CDC's preliminary estimates for the year 2018 to 2019, 34,000 people died from the flu. And when you look back at the CDC's estimates, stretching back nearly a decade, as I have, none of the recorded influenza deaths reached anywhere near 100,000. In 2016, in fact, it reached 61,000, and that was at its peak. So there is quite a bit of inaccuracy in that tweet.
It's possible he was talking about global deaths, not domestic. I don't know. Either way, the point is the same. Tens of thousands of people die from the flu every year. We do have a vaccine that's readily available. It's very important that people get the vaccine, that they take it early this season, because the flu plus COVID, when those things combine, that's a recipe for a real mess in the United States and around the world.
And then you also have the long history of this president disparaging anyone for wearing a mask, including Joe Biden. At the debate, Trump took off his own mask before walking back into the White House. So it isn't just the messaging, it's the optics as well that are damning. And now with Trump behind Biden by double digits and 72 to 73% of independents expressing distrust in Trump, providing any accurate information on COVID, where does it leave him?
Yeah, look, there's no question that last week was a bad week for the Trump campaign. And with limited time left, and given the fact that he's behind, that was a costly week. It was the combination of the debate, which kind of turned into a circus-like atmosphere, and then obviously the news around his COVID positive test and the treatment associated with that, and the way they handled it. I do think he has a chance to turn the page this week. We have the vice presidential debate. The campaign is sending a lot of surrogates, including the vice president, around the country towards the end of the week. And hopefully next week we get back to a more normal period of time. We only have 3 or 4 weeks left. I do believe Biden is ahead. I don't believe he's up 14 to 16%. I know some polls have shown that. This is not a national race. It's a state-by-state race, and it's a race that's being fought in 5 to 8 battleground states. Trump still has a path to victory, but it is narrow, and it is less likely today than it was 2 weeks ago.
But how does he recover from this politically? How does he make up the trust deficit in time for the elections?
Well, he needs to make this election about more than COVID. And about more than it being a referendum on him. It has to be a choice between the vision he has and Biden offers. A choice on the economy, a choice on crime in our cities, a choice on the Supreme Court. These are the issues where he has an advantage in the polling. And if he can get this race back on those issues, he can regain some of that support and give Biden a very competitive race.
Matt Mackowiak, a Republican strategist, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
As Trump continues his COVID treatment at the White House and with 4 million ballots already cast in early voting, former Vice President Joe Biden has continued to campaign.
Here's what I'll do as president. Number one, call on every single American to wear a mask when they're around other people outside their households. That includes when they ride public transportation, buses, trains, airplanes.
The messaging from both candidates couldn't be more starkly different, with President Trump removing his mask before even entering the White House on Monday evening following his hospitalization, and Biden saying that as president, he would mandate the wearing of masks on all federal property. So how will all this go down with voters in early November? Joining me now is the Reverend Al Sharpton, a former Democratic presidential candidate, civil rights activist, and author of the new book, Rise Up, Confronting a Country at the Crossroads. Reverend Sharpton, clearly the way the White House has handled the past few days has only added to the chaos. The president is telling everyone not to be afraid of this virus, to let their guard down, while the number of infected people around him and his administration continues to grow. Have you ever seen a White House, a U.S. government in such disarray? Is this a White House? Is this an administration in crisis?
It is an administration in very serious crisis, and even more so, it is adding to a nation in crisis. For the President of the United States to be one that is found positive with COVID-19 is something that is startling to all Americans. And even those of us that politically oppose him said we wished him well. And I came out and said, as one of his staunch detractors and critics, that I pray for him and his wife sincerely. A day later, as we're talking about unity, he decides to take a joyride around the White House. Around the hospital, the block of the hospital. And then a day or two later, leaves the hospital, dramatically walks up the exterior steps of the White House, and rips off his face mask and tell people, don't be afraid to face COVID and don't let it dominate your life. The exact messages we don't need. It
But
is
so what does it boil
obscene.
down to, Reverend? I mean, does it boil down to arrogance? Is it incompetence, dishonesty, recklessness? What is it?
I think it is, first of all, it's an obscene act, but I think he's the ultimate narcissist. And it seems that his self-aggrandizement knows no bounds, including his own health.
You said a few days ago, you said, quote, rather than doing an I told you so, I hope we can make some real things move forward now that it has hit home to him. This was a few days ago, but we've seen since then the president's defiance on the steps of the White House, as you say, on the White House balcony when he took off his mask. Obviously, you were too optimistic, weren't you?
I was too hopeful, and I think we should always have hope. But isn't it a sad commentary that you are disappointed by the President of the United States for saying we hope that we could get things done on a virus he and his wife has? So I don't feel bad about being hopeful. I'm bad that he couldn't live up to our hopes.
But the president says he gets it. He says he now understands it. But a majority of the American people believe that Trump has not taken this issue seriously enough. In fact, 72% recently said that Trump had not taken the risk of contracting COVID-19 seriously enough. Another 72% said Trump had not taken the appropriate precautions when it came to his own personal health. Just how alarmed are you at his behavior? You mentioned that some medical doctors have pointed out that it was irresponsible of him to take that joyride outside of Walter Reed. Some have also said that he is now on medications that do impact cognitive abilities. Are you among those who believe that this constitutes a national security crisis?
I think it does raise serious national security concerns that someone that seems as off balance as he is in his judgment on his own health is one that could have to deal with a foreign or domestic crisis. And that is a national security risk that we ought not take lightly.
But if the medication does impair his judgment, do you think the 25th Amendment should be seriously considered and his powers taken away from him temporarily by his cabinet and his vice president in accordance with the Constitution?
I think the 25th Amendment should not be taken off the table, considering his bizarre behavior over the last 2 days.
And when you look at the way he has disparaged anyone and everyone, including those people who work at the White House, for wearing a mask, according to a former member of the coronavirus task force who has since resigned, at the presidential debate, when he took on the former Vice President Biden and mocked him for wearing a mask.
I wear masks when needed. When needed, I wear masks.
Okay, let me ask.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen.
Biden was just a few feet away from the president at that debate, and he has tested negative since. But if Trump had already been infected, as some people suspect, he could have infected Biden, and we wouldn't know with certainty for another week or so. A negative test doesn't mean he's completely in the clear. Should Biden still be out campaigning?
No, you're absolutely right, and we don't know. And for him to mock people, to mock Biden during the debate, to mock reporters saying, will you pull that thing off? I can't hear you. I mean, to openly mock people and to minimize the impact of something that has killed 211,000 Americans and infected millions is the height of irresponsibility and is certainly something the American people shouldn't take lightly.
And is that going to cost him at the polls? Because not only is he trailing quite a bit behind Joe Biden nationally, but he's losing support among older voters. Biden has 62%, Trump 35% support among that group. Among suburban women, Biden's at 58% and Trump just 33%. Is this going to cost him on November 3rd?
Sure, it will cost him, especially among those that was giving him the benefit of the doubt. He confirms every day, don't give me the benefit of the doubt. I believe that I can do whatever I want to do and people will be with me anyway.
And 63% of Americans, in fact, are saying that he has acted irresponsibly to people around him, including that time when he did go on that ride. And it has also led to many medical experts expressing their bafflement that the president was discharged so early on, given the mix of heavy medications and steroids he's receiving, which apparently are typically reserved for patients who are extremely sick, patients who are on ventilators or supplemental oxygen. There was also that extraordinary scene of the president, as you say, a COVID patient going for that drive just to wave to his supporters. It was quite unprecedented, in fact, Reverend Sharpton, to see an MD from Walter Reed, where the president was being treated, criticize his recklessness for exposing Secret Service agents to serious potential risk. Dr. James Phillips tweeted this. He said, "Every single person in the vehicle during that completely unnecessary presidential drive-by just now has to be quarantined for 14 days. They might get sick, they may die for political theater, commanded by Trump to put their lives at risk for theater. This is insanity." Is that the word you would also use to describe this?
I would definitely use the words insanity. I would agree with him. And I would definitely say that even Republican leaders ought to say it is insane, it is insulting, as we have people laying in hospitals now praying for their lives, and he's telling the country, don't let it dominate your life.
Yet there's been complete silence among Republicans.
And I think that the president and those Republicans will pay for it on Election Day. How can you be silent when people are dying by the hundreds every day, even now in this country?
What about the role of Congress on the whole? Trump has instructed his representatives, as he calls them, Republicans on the Hill, not to negotiate with Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi on the relief package until after the election. Is he trying to buy votes by putting a stimulus package on the ballot? And could this strategy backfire?
Well, he's either trying to buy votes, but he's also shown a keen insensitivity to the fact people are suffering. People got one stimulus check, could not stretch it till now. He wants to prolong it another 3 weeks. Small businesses are going out of business. Some will never return. He doesn't understand the average American can't wait 3 weeks into where this is discussed. And even then, we don't know if this will end on election night. Suppose it takes 2 or 3 days, and then they start debating the stimulus bill. He's telling people to hold their breath when they already have been exhausted of all of their finances.
How concerned are you about Election Day and what comes after?
I'm very concerned that when Donald Trump has cast this doubt and said that he wants his people at the polls, I'm very concerned there will be efforts to suppress the votes, efforts to intimidate people, and I am very concerned that Donald Trump will not commit to a peaceful transition of power.
And what's your advice to Joe Biden and the Democratic Party in the midst of all of this unknown and uncertainty?
My advice to them is they must have a maximum turnout so that it is so many people coming out that they can't play games there. And they need to have whatever legal apparatus is available to them to make sure that there's an enforced peaceful transition, since your opponent has already said he's not committing to that.
Is this an election that is theirs to lose? Do they have the right strategy, and will they have enough turnout?
I think they have the right turnout. From the early voting states that I've seen over the last several days, I think the turnout will be there. It is theirs to lose, but they should make sure it is not stolen from them. I don't think that it will be their loss at the polls. I think it will be methods of suppression and voter counting that I'm concerned about.
If you were to make one prediction, what would it be?
That is going to be a long night and maybe a couple of days, but I think Donald Trump will be leaving the White House.
Reverend Al Sharpton, thank you so very much for joining us. A pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
The surrealism of the past few days has painted the picture of a president and a White House in complete disarray, with polls showing that the administration's handling of this latest crisis has led to a slippage, possibly even fatal, of Trump's ratings, with voting already underway. The erratic and questionable behavior of the president has added a new crisis to the existing health and economic and credibility challenges. Now the U.S. is said to be facing a national security crisis. Critics and observers, including medical doctors, are raising the question of the known psychotropic effect of the steroids the president is taking. And more observers are now speculating, unlikely as it may be, whether the 25th Amendment to the US Constitution should not be invoked by the cabinet and the vice president to declare that the president is unable to govern. And with Vice President Pence on the campaign trail now that Trump is confined to the White House, he too is at risk of contracting COVID-19. The mere thought that if both he and Pence would be incapacitated, their nemesis, the Democratic Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, could become the acting president is a thought that would make Trump sick beyond COVID-19. And so, in short, the threats to national security posed by a president whose cognitive capacity could be affected by steroids puts not only the United States at risk, it puts the world at risk if the president of the most powerful nuclear power is fighting for his political life and, whether he recognizes it or not, is fighting for his own life as he battles a virus that has already killed 215,000 Americans. That's all from me and the team here in Washington. Let us know what you think. And as always, thanks for watching.